we go ahead and get going here. Um, so hi everyone. My name is Nathan. I'm calling from Seattle, just in case. I know I normally ask that, didn't this time, but um, calling in from Seattle, and I'm a marketing manager here at Data Science Dojo. I'm really excited to have Matthew Coatney here with us. He is the Chief Information Officer at Thompson Hine LLP, also an award-winning author. Matthew, we're really excited to have you. I know I mentioned it earlier for Q&A today. If you're in Zoom, use that Q&A tab, upvote questions. Matthew's going to be answering them kind of sporadically throughout the webinar today. And for any questions that may take a little longer to answer, he'll get to those at the end. If you're in one of our live streams, that could be LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We do have team members out there, so go ahead, use the chat to ask your questions, and we'll bring them into Zoom and make sure they get answered as well. So Matthew, with that, why don't you go ahead and get going here, and thanks for joining again.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks all for being here. Look forward to the conversation. So I guess I should say I'm coming from Dayton, Ohio area. So the heart of it all, as it were, Midwestern states of the US. I will give just a bit of quick background about my journey. So starting with my personal journey and what has worked well for me and some of the pitfalls I've had along the way, and then pivot to talk more generally about this concept of being T-shaped, how that applies in a data science world, and things that you can do to really make yourself more marketable and more valuable to the organizations, your clients, and your teams. So let's jump in. I always preface these kind of talks by making fun of myself, and I dredge up some really terrible pictures from my childhood, just to show I am a real person too. So a bit of my background, a very interesting picture of me as a young, not so cool kid. On the left side of the screen, that is me. I think it was about fourth grade. Yes, I'm clutching a Cabbage Patch doll, if any of you know what that is. But most importantly, in the back corner of the room was my very first computer. This was circa 1982, 80 or 85-ish, and it's an IBM PC Junior. So that is how I started with technology, and it's been going ever since then. I had a bit of a punk rock phase, grunge phase in the 90s. So that's me with green hair and my then girlfriend, now wife. And those are some of the bands that I like. But okay, so more seriously, what's my real background? So I've been in technology of some fashion or another for better part of my career, professionally about 25 years, non-professionally longer than that. I started my career building software, but always in the data application realm. So think databases, machine learning, did a lot of Java and SQL initially, a lot more Python of late. But we're in that intersection of development and data science. I'll talk a bit more about that. But I pivoted, and we'll talk about that, into more of management, business leadership. There's a reason for that, but I always kept my technology roots. And then more recently, I've done a lot of talking and writing about these topics because I found it, one, I really enjoy it. I wanted to be an English professor at one point in my life and didn't head that route, but I enjoy getting information out there to you all and being helpful, being of use. So back to my first real job. So I got out of school and actually interned at a software startup, and we were building this. So this is a screenshot from really the first commercial software that I worked with. And yes, it's incredibly dated, so you can laugh at the terrible user experience, but this was state of the art back 20 years ago. But it was all about helping scientists, particularly pharmaceutical drug researchers, find chemical compounds that could be drug candidates more quickly and safely than the traditional methods. So we did a lot of coding, and it was pretty intense. So we did two-dimensional and three-dimensional chemical modeling. We did multi-dimensional feature analysis and classification and clustering and all these kinds of algorithms that we think are largely commonplace today, and you can just pick up off the shelf. Back in the early days, we hand rolled them all. So it was a blast. I still say it was one of my most favorite jobs because it was just cool. And, we wrote code. I was writing lots of really hand rolling some of the algorithms, association rule mining and feature fingerprinting were some of the ones that I worked on, as well as I had a background in biochemistry. So I did a lot of the chemistry side of it as well. But here's the problem. And this was sort of my initial pitfall / pivot, was this. So for all of the great work that we did, and we built amazing software and loved it, when it met the real world, it just exploded. We were in some ways too new to the market. We didn't listen to our user base. We weren't really tuned in to the customer. And we also weren't tuned into the industry and the market forces, because at that same time, pharmaceutical companies were merging like crazy. You'd think that would be a good thing, but when they merged, they froze their IT budgets, which meant nobody was buying new software, and the market dried up overnight. That was the frustrating part for me, but it also opened my eyes to say, okay, I love this. I love this direction that we're taking, right? I love the work that I'm doing, but can I help get the science to the people that need it, right? And Nathan and I were talking before, and you can be the most best, most brilliant data scientist in the world. I'm not one of those, but you could be. And it still wouldn't mean a lick if you can't explain those concepts to someone who's not, and help get them to see and appreciate the value, tell the story, and make an impact. So that making an impact was what really resonated to me. All right. So what did I do after that? I like to say I was a debutante. This visual is more akin to what it was actually like. I didn't have a clear path. It wasn't, I am going to go here and I have this clear destination in my mind. I knew that I wanted to pick up skills that rounded me out while I kept that deep experience on the data and development side of the house. But I needed these other skill sets, these business skill sets. So I had roles, all of these, from more on the management side to communications, a product manager. I did a lot of consulting. And I even picked up things like infrastructure and security, which may seem at first like, why would you need that? But again, when you take and scale up some of these models that we are building as data scientists into the real world, you have to know a lot of that and appreciate what it takes to bring something to scale in a production environment and have compliance and privacy concerns and quality concerns, and how do you accommodate for bias and all of these other kinds of things. So this is where I was. And again, I didn't at the time know quite what I was doing, other than I knew that this would be helpful to me. So it wasn't just about switching roles. And a lot of times these roles were switches within an existing company. I wasn't jumping jobs every 6 months. It was finding new ways to add value within organizations. And it also meant dabbling a lot in other industries. Everything from healthcare, where I started, more into finance and law, where I spend a lot of my time now. I'm a CIO at a law firm, nonprofits, and others. And what I found, much like, and you all probably appreciate on the data science side, the techniques and tools that you're picking up, the first one that you learn, it's really hard. The second one you learn, maybe a little easier. By the time you learn the third or fourth, you start to see patterns and you see the connections across these different technologies or these different approaches, and you can start to sort of think at a more abstract layer. And the same thing happens with your skills and your industries that you work in. You start to see things that you can connect dots that you didn't see before. So again, this was all happenstance. It was sort of following the bouncing ball. But what happened over time was I started to see that I was able to add more value, and that I was more just attractive to hiring managers and to clients looking for these blended skill sets. So when I put it all together, I joke, this is sort of what I'm thinking in my head. The reality is more like, for those of you that have seen Office Space, basically, I'm the person that takes the requirements from the customers and gives them to the developers, right? So all kidding aside on that, there is a lot of value there. Okay, so let's actually dive in then, and let's talk to what does it mean to be T-shaped. And I was actually introduced to this, not my concept. I was introduced to it probably 4 or 5 years ago, and have been espousing its virtues ever since. you hear the phrase, you need to be well-rounded, right? Well-rounded, that's the phrase that people say is the key to success. And it's, if all you are is well-rounded and you're a generalist, then yes, that can add value, but you don't lose sight of the deep specialization you have in one area. So the ideal is you combine both. You have a deep specialization in a few fields, one or two fields, and then you have really not super deep knowledge, right? That's the horizontal, the breadth piece, but you have a working understanding of a wide set of important core skills. These are the things that other people have called soft skills. There's nothing soft about them. They're universal. They're critical. And I think soft actually sort of diminishes their value a little bit. We'll talk about what those core skills are and how you can develop some of them, but I wanted to highlight you can do both. I think there's this misconception that if you start to generalize, you lose that's the ability to specialize. And I will say it's true in technology up to a point, because technology is moving so quickly, the concepts are so complex, and particularly in data science, where you're melding, true scientific method and investigation and hypotheses and all these good things married with really complex algorithms, large sets of data, and tech that you need to work with to get all that to work. It's a lot. So I'm not suggesting that you abandon that for sake of these other attributes, but rather you make some space for them, make some space to build around core competencies of communication and leadership and management and business, so that you can be more effective as a data scientist. Now that I am sitting as a CIO, I will say there is a point, and I'm past that, where yes, I can still write code. You do not want me developing things for you. I'm too far out of that. But in the middle of my career, and at a prior role at a data science company called Exaptive, I literally was selling business in the morning and writing data applications at night for things like for organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and for life sciences companies on the East Coast. So it can be done. It can be done. Okay. So let's talk a bit about why is this valuable? And I touched on a little bit of this already. But the key word that I always reference is it's perspective. You have better context. You can connect the dots better when you have more general awareness. And I'll use an example, right? So we were doing work for the Gates Foundation, and it was around healthcare outcomes of policies in different countries and how it related to improving malnutrition. So really, really admirable cause, great program, great organization and team. And we were looking at a bunch of metrics around both demographics and policies and seeing what worked and what didn't, and then trying to compare that across different countries in a peer group. And the traditional way of doing that was looking at an individual country and then looking at the countries around it and say, well, okay, if you're in Germany, what did Switzerland and Denmark, and basically look along the borders. And what we said was, no, you've got to look at the country as though it were an individual and say, what's common about that individual or that country with other countries, anywhere they may be in the world, because it was the characteristics that were more relevant. The important point here was there was a lot of data. It was predominantly an analysis project. But if we didn't understand geopolitical powers and how the governments of one country or another might react to those policies, whether the data was spurious because that particular country was suppressing the free gathering of data, like all of those things were incredibly relevant. And had we simply said, that's not our problem, we're just looking at the data, we would have missed an opportunity. So it's understanding the why. Why is the business asking us to look at this? Why are they investigating this? What's the real reason, right? They're asking for one thing, but they really mean something completely different. So being able to talk their language, even just at a passable level, right? I work with lawyers all day. I am not a lawyer, and I could not hold wait with them in a real substantive conversation, but I can understand their jargon. I can understand the lingo, and I can work well with them. And at the end of the day, you'll be able to build a deeper trust and buy-in to get the outcomes you're looking for when you're having those conversations with them, if they understand that you're at least taking an interest in what they do and you're not sort of snubbing them. So, and that's the, I mentioned this earlier, specialization is good, right? That's what we're talking about here. You still need to have that specialization because that's going to add an immense amount of value. But if you can develop even a modest level of skills in other areas, great. You are more valuable to, leaders like me now that are in that position that I was trying to sell to 10, 15, 20 years ago. I find that valuable. And I want to encourage, because I was one of those people, if you have a non-traditional background, you don't need to hide it or run away from it. I hear people that have a philosophy degree and they're like, well, I have a philosophy degree, but now I'm in AI. A philosophy degree is one of the best things to have in this industry because you understand logic and the way that people work and the way brains work and all of these other, you have that historical context. It's wonderful. So embrace it. I think it actually can be a competitive differentiator for you all. So again, just encouraging and then avoiding, and I have said these things in my past and I have heard it said more time than not. And I'm sure you're thinking, oh shoot, I've said this too, right? That's not my job. I don't deal with the customers. I don't deal with why. I don't ask those questions. I just look at the numbers. I'm just numbers and rows and columns. That's not a great attitude. I don't need to know the business to analyze data. And if the business would only figure out what they want, which is a common one, why can't they just figure out what they want? It's a lot harder than it looks. Now being on the side of the business, I'd almost rather go back and do coding because of business seems easy on the surface. It is combinatorially complex, and you're dealing with people and humans, and that's a recipe for complexity. So I just saw in the chat. So Ian has a psych degree, and he says almost every meeting I'm in, someone's saying, "Oh, that's a really good point." So yes, absolutely. Those kind of diverse backgrounds really, really do help you shine in an area where it can be very competitive. Yeah. All right, I've got to share this. So yeah, they make great icebreakers. So Athena just shared in the chat that her undergrad is in 18th century English literature, which is awesome. So yeah, great way to start. Mine is biochemistry, but which I guess is less cool. But I started as an English major, wanting to be a professor, and actually dabbled in history for a while as well. So I couldn't make up my mind. All right. Well, good. So let's jump in then a little bit and talk more concretely about the skills. And the punchline at the end, and unfortunately this means it's a lot, it's basically everything. You don't have to know all of these in the same level of detail, but I've found some of these to be critically important. The first three that I have on that list, project and time management, sort of go hand in hand. Written and spoken communication. Those three are universal life skills you will use in your job, you will use in your career search, you will use with your family, you will use with your nonprofit organizations that you're volunteering for. Universal. So, and this is not to say everybody needs to speak like an English professor and be an eloquent public speaker or anything along those lines. I'm talking about building some basic skills, particularly around sort of how to prioritize, how to think, how to organize yourself, how to organize others, and then how to communicate that information. That is how work gets done. And we all are not going to have the luxury of working in an organization that has a data storyteller. As much as that, as cool as that is, and if you're a data storyteller, that's awesome. I can't imagine having a job like that, but it just sounds sweet. But we're going to have to do some of that. We're going to have to communicate the why. We're going to have to be able to articulate what this means to the business, because often there's no one else to do it. That's the reality of, I've worked in small and medium businesses pretty much my whole career, absent one large company. I haven't had the resources that a Microsoft or Google would have, and that's okay. So you have to pick up these skills. The notion of perspective taking and design thinking, there's a sort of concrete element to that, but it's also just about listening, empathizing, building your social awareness skills and your social empathy skills, and being able to think like your constituents. And as another example, I work a lot with finance and have supported finance a lot, probably about a decade or so combined. And at first, I was not very effective at it because I frankly didn't understand. I'm like, what is it you do again? And why? Yeah, why are you thinking this way? Well, it just, I couldn't get in their head to understand why something that seemed trivial or simple or not a big deal was crucial for them. But then once I got into their shoes more, I spent time with them, just understanding. Then I was like, oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, you're under a lot of pressure right now. And this is why it's a problem. Here's how I can help you, or here's how we can model this better. Okay, so that's on the sort of the left side. The right side are more on the business and organizational front. And I have found I've spent more time in the business and sales and marketing than I thought I ever would. I've come to appreciate them. I had a very dim view of those organizations when I started. But I've come to appreciate it's much more complex than I gave it credit, and they're earnestly trying to do a great job. I mention those because, again, it's part of every exercise. Most every exercise we do is going to have a business outcome, a business case. It's going to drive either one of the levers of revenue, cost, or time, or something like that. And having an understanding of how those levers move a business, it's the vernacular. You don't have to go deep in this, but even just a cursory course from, I think it was Harvard Business School has a online program that's inexpensive. There's free versions out there from Stanford and others. So while you're brushing up on your technical skills, check out some of those free courses as well. All right. So like I said, it's a lot. It's not something you're going to pick up over time. What I would recommend is picking one or two of these that either interest you more than the others, or you say, this is something I could really stand to beef up on because I don't feel comfortable in that area. Target one of those a year, and in a decade, you got it all covered. So a decade actually goes by quicker than it feels like now that I'm sitting in decade 3 of my career. So yeah, chip away at it, make it part of your development plan. And that's the easiest way to get it done. You don't try to swallow it all at once. Last thing I'll say, so on the written and spoken communication, I understand it's an international audience, and I've worked internationally a lot. I saw a great comment, and it reminded me again of perspective taking and empathy, that the amount of energy it takes for a non-native speaker in a meeting, in a session, is significantly higher than those that are native speakers. And so I think we need to be all cognizant of that, and appreciating of that, and sort of culturally empathetic, because the shoe can always be on the other foot, and you can be the person in that meeting with a bunch of folks that are native speakers in their own tongue. So be mindful of that. And again, if you're terrified of public speaking, I didn't share that earlier, but something like this would have absolutely terrified me about 20 years ago. The very first talk I gave was weirdly in Maebashi, Japan. It was for a data science conference in 2000, which tells you how it was like 40 people in the room. That was pretty much the data science community in 2000. I was terrified. I was sweating bullets. I stumbled. I barely got through the talk. This right here is 25 years of immersion therapy of just trying to build up a little more increments and safe zones of giving talks to small groups, to my team, things like that, just to start get more comfortable. So again, not striving for perfection. It's all about improvement. Okay, so let's talk briefly about how you can get some of these skills. So my old, I'd say uneducated, unenlightened answer was say, just go into consulting or startups. Partly that was my experience, and I do think that they are great opportunities to get in to a lot of varied experience quickly. Both of them throw you at the fire quickly. You wear many, many different hats. You can't specialize because you have so many needs to serve and not enough resources. So they were a great formative piece of my career early on. And I gave that actually. So I was on a podcast and I gave that advice. And then the person stopped me, and I give them tons of kudos for doing this. They stopped me and said, yeah, that's nice, but what about the 90% of the people that don't have access to those? And I paused and thought, and I said, that is a really good point, right? And it made me sort of humbled me to say, well, yes, I was, I'm a white male in America in a upper middle income household that had the opportunity to go to college and got introduced to startups. Okay, great, but what else? So now I have a better answer, hopefully, and that is there are lots of opportunities that are opening up to a broader set of folks, and that's awesome. So I want to give some plugs, and I've got a slide on useful resources here in a moment that'll list more of these. But there are lots of ways to engage with really meaningful work quickly. And it's the cycle time that's so important, because with consulting and startups, the reason that those work so well, and my oldest is playing soccer now, they say it's touches on the ball. It's all about practice with coaching and feedback along the way. So how many times can you touch on the ball? If you go to work at a very, very large company and you're given one project and it lasts 18 months and you're sort of just doing the same thing over and over, you're not growing. In a startup, you're doing a project every 2 hours. You're in a consulting engagement, you have 30 different clients in a year. So you're getting all those touches on the ball, but there are other ways to do that too. So micro internships, I not knowing where you all are in your careers, but if you are new to your career, either in school still or coming out of school, check out Parker Dewey, others. I'll list them all on the next page. Freelance gigs are a great way. Again, depending on where you are in your career, there's different entry points for that. And they can be everything from a 2-hour job to a 2-month to a 2-year job. There's a lot of variety there. We'll talk about those. Open source, the open source community is a great way to get access to resources, competitions. These are probably not all, I'm sure none of these are new to you, but also nonprofits. I've been on two nonprofit boards, as well as volunteered at a few more, and they're desperate for help, and they're great causes, great missions, very appreciable, and you get great experience too. So it's a win-win for everybody. All right, so as promised, some helpful resources around that. So we've got freelance sites. Now, I'm sure some of you, if not a lot of you, are out there scoping around at what kind of jobs there are. On Upwork is probably the most common one, and it's a low barrier to entry. So it is an ability to find work, you bid on it. I'll tell a story about that here in a moment, but you can bid on work, you get accepted, and then you do gigs, and then you get paid. And you don't have to, I, as a full-time employee, as long as I was avoiding any conflicts of interest, I was freelancing on the side, usually to try to get my writing habit itched. But it was a good experience, and you can do that while you're employed, or you can actually freelance full-time if you're successful enough at that. Now, as you get more seasoned, if you have 5-10 years under your belt, there are sites that are more selective and sort of higher tier clientele. TopTalk, Gigster, Gigged AI are a couple of examples of those. There are many others. I'd be curious if folks put it in the chat or on the in the question and answer. I would imagine there is a data science specific gig forum out there, but maybe it's Data Science Dojo, but finding those kind of gigs for data science, they're on all of these as well, but I'm sure there's specific ones for data science as well. Micro internships, I mentioned Parker Dewey. I had the opportunity of being on a podcast with the founder of that organization. It's just brilliant work that they're doing. So if you have kids that are in college, check that out too. Open source resources, these are just a few of many, but some of my interesting ones, because getting access to data and pre-built models, it can still be challenging. And these are repositories where you can go and do that sort of right off the shelf. And there are many others. And then competition sites, these have been out forever. They were famously or infamously linked with like the Netflix algorithm improvement challenge and things of that nature. And innocentive.com is a good one, as well as driven data, because those are both more mission oriented. So you do good work, you have a chance to win some money, and you're helping a worthy cause, and you're learning along the way. So again, all of these, and these were intentionally selected because a lot of these, right, especially on the freelance side, to freelance, it may be like, okay, I'm going to download some data, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to feed it back to the client, and done. What's it teaching you? It's teaching you client communication, project management, setting expectations, finance, P&L, taxes. It's great because you're getting that data science experience at the same time, but you're learning what it's like to run a business of one, and it's really, really great experience. So encourage that. Good. Seeing in the chats too, there's Stats Canada is a good one as well. All right. Okay, so a couple more. I just wanted to take a moment to broaden it out a little bit, and then we'll open it up for questions. But part of the reason that I'm so passionate about this is, well, before I go there, so I also have a book. Product placement. I'm not trying to promote it, but the whole point of that is around freelance economy and sort of how gig work can start to be a mode of operation that's more normal for employment in the future. That's sort of one side of it. My co-author, that's his bailiwick. My piece was more around automation and how automation is transforming the way that the world of work is happening. I actually met my co-author on Upwork. I did a ghostwriting project for him, and then that formed into a friendship. And then we decided crazily to go write a book, which I don't know why we did, but it was a lot of fun. So the important part of that, and this is sort of taken from some slides we talk about as we're talking about the content of the book, is being T-shaped and being more valuable is going to be increasingly not just important, but it's an imperative. You have to do it, because what we're seeing is that, this is a PwC report that roughly 40% of US jobs are at high risk of automation by the early 2030s. That's a decade away. It's terrifying. And I've seen other stats that go even higher than that. And of course, these are all predictions are famously, usually they're directionally correct, but they're wrong on the time. It could come earlier or later. But this is my point. It's not who will be affected, it's how will we be affected, and how will you all be affected. And that does apply to us. So I think there's this misperception, and I work with lawyers, scientists, executives, myself included, right? And we like to think that, automation is something that's going to replace that work. We're safe. It's that work over there. But when you look at, and there are assessments done about how likely a role is to be impacted based on automation, and these are on the list as the higher ones. So everything from arts and entertainment and journalists, knowledge workers, which is my space with law, software development, data analysis, shipping, you see it all, right? It's basically everything, and I throw myself in that camp. So that's where we're at, and it's a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit terrifying. There's a lot of fear there, right? And so this is what we've heard, and we used in the book, we used journalism as an example. So with journalism, the fear is that a robot's going to go and do the entire article for you. It's going to start with the research, it's going to form that into thoughts, it's going to write it, it's going to edit it, it's going to publish, it's going to market it, it's going to do everything, and we're all going to be out of jobs. And the reality is it's not going to shape up that way. And there's where the hope lies, is it's a combination. It's a hybrid world where technology is going to increasingly, and it already is, increasingly do more of the heavy lifting for us. But then the human in the equation is going to be it's the synthesizing, it's the how. How does this all stitch together? It's guiding, it's asking the question that the robot needs to answer, right? So it is much more a partnership with technology than it is an antagonistic relationship, or can be. But in order to do that, you have to work with and understand both technology and humans. You already have one leg of that really well in hand, that's awesome. You're ahead of 95% of the population by knowing technology, and it's a great foundational skill. But what happens when AI takes more and more of the routinized work? That's when expert intelligence and these soft skills, these core skills I've been talking about, that's when they really kick in. So these are the things that we need as future leaders, as future employed people to really be focused on. And they're the things that I highlighted earlier. The last thing I'd say on this is, when I look at, we can have some lofty ideals of what we do in the world of data science. I know I do as well. And I've heard people say, but we're scientists, we're not developers, we're not technologists, we are scientists. I'm like, okay, that's great. Yes, true. But as a scientist, how many hours of your day are you spending formatting that data? Downloading it from a repository, pivoting it, fixing it, cleaning it up. Then you're marrying it with other data. Then you're trying 20 different algorithms to see which one gives you the best results. Then you're assessing those, and it goes on and on and on. Everything that I just listed there could be automated. So if you could push a button and do all of that, what are you doing with your 8 or 7.5 hours of your day? And that's where these skills really come into play. So again, being multidisciplinary, having that background, having that broad perspective will make you much more valuable in the near future, now and in the near future. Okay. So that's the stick. Hopefully that's helpful. In addition to the sites that I shared, you can check out humancloud.work. That's more on the freelance side. You can check out me on LinkedIn. It's the easiest way to get to me. More importantly, I wanted to see what kind of questions you all had.
So it looks like we have one question right now, Matthew, but I'm sure people are typing out. If you want to take a crack at that one, go for it. Otherwise, I'm happy to talk about next week's webinars while we wait.
Sure. Sounds good. So I will take this question, and it's it's a tough one. So can you explain to me when a data scientist became equivalent to an automated quality control door bouncer? I'm confused. That's why they classify that as sciences. I would agree. I mean, I think that is where, and this happens to all of the sciences. If you talk to any other scientist that goes and works for a corporation, I think the reality is it's what happens when science and research collide with business needs and business drivers and pressure. And I have seen it, and I've been guilty of it as well, where the pressures can circumvent sort of sound logic and lead in a path that you wouldn't want it to go. So I think, I would say, yes, that is a concern. I think the best defense to that is not to retread, but to build some of the kinds of skills around communication, empathy, leadership, and change management. Because at the end of the day, the business drivers, they don't want to do anything unethical. They don't want to lead down a path that's going to be unsuccessful, for sure. But in the moment, they may not be thinking they're driving toward a deadline and a revenue target and a bonus and all these other kinds of things that all could be in jeopardy if a bad model gets through. And so putting some of those controls in place are important. So when I think about that, I think about it less of sort of, well, we just need to return to the core of sciences. It's about how do you build that empathy and show, why you should take a pause and think through it and educate. I think the more that I've seen business leaders understand some of those aspects, the more they're willing to hit pause and say, let's see what the data tells us. And if all that sounds icky to you, go into academia because that's the business world. So also a question from Jim is book title, please. Thank you. So it is The Human Cloud. It's through HarperCollins. It is both an ebook through Kindle. There's an audiobook read by a brilliant person. So I take no credit for that, not my voice. And then also hardback. We also have I'll plug our podcast too. So the podcast is also called The Human Cloud. It's on Spotify and Apple and all that good stuff. It's fun. We don't take ourselves too seriously. It's a lot of banter back and forth. So if you're looking for a highbrow, that's not it, but it's fun. So I encourage you to check that one out as well. and it is available in Korean as well. That was really, really cool. This was total, like, this was as a former English person wanting to become a professor. This is like bucket list item. I didn't think this would be the topic I would be writing on, but always keeping me humble. When my middle child, when he found out that I was writing a book, he goes, "Oh, that's cool. What's it about?" I said, "Well, it's sort of about work and computers." And he goes, "Huh, that sounds boring." So that's where I'm at, but it's cool to me. All right, other questions.
I know we have a couple in the chat. Oh, looks like someone just put it into the Q&A tab.
Oh,
I know.
great. Yeah, good. Go ahead, Nathan. You go first. Yeah.
I was gonna say, remember that if my puppy will stay out of the shot, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A tab for us. It just helps us keep everything organized. So looks like Michaela has a question for you.
Great. All right. So Michaela's wondering about advice I give to a budding data scientist trying to identify which area to specialize in. Great question. I actually got the same question from a high school student more broadly about technology. Like, what should I go into? What's going to be the big thing in 5 years? And I'm like, if I knew that, I would invest in it and retire in 5 years, and I don't know. I think my advice would be actually try things out. Especially, it sounds like you're sort of newer to career. You have the opportunity to experience a lot of different aspects of data science. And that could be everything from industry to type of data to type of approach to where you fit in that pipeline. So it's easy enough now to find a couple of projects or gigs or a company that has a diverse clientele where you can try a lot of those early on and see where you gravitate to. That's my advice, not knowing your particular background and desires. Yeah, and I think that I think as well with that, again, as you're doing that, you'll get some of this kinds of skills I'm talking about also. But yeah. I'll say for me, what I love, I don't know, there's so many, like, I have so many passions in this space. I am sort of like a squirrel following, a nut or something like that. I can't make up my mind, but I've gravitated a lot to text analytics in probably the second half of my career, where I started more on the structure side. Text analytics are really interesting. I think there is still a long way to go on that, even with the advances that we've seen with GPT and things like that. There's still a lot to be done, both on the text interpretation side and the text generation side. So that's still a rich area to explore. And then definitely, the real world, meaning, so physical objects, robotics, visual and video interpretation. These are areas that are definitely will evolve pretty quickly over the next 5-10 years. Yeah. Sorry. And yeah, the other question was around clarifying the point about my joke about if you were uncomfortable with all that go into academia. No, it was that the reality of the business world is you're always going to feel the pressures of a business that's a growing concern, that has shareholders and executives, and that are sort of having business drivers. And so the art of that is how to accomplish good science and do good work while aligning that with the aims of the organization. And where there is a mismatch or a dissonance, when you don't have that alignment, helping to educate and get people to that, so that you're not doing anything sort of against your ethics or against science, general scientific principles. So my joke was, yeah, academia can help you escape that, but that's not true, because then you have the pressure of being published, and it's just a different set of incentives. So that was my comment there.
Two more, or one more, and then we'll let you go.
All right. Okay. Oh, good one here. I love this. Okay. This is great. Okay. What's the future career directions of your family, extended members, children, nieces, family, friends, kids, etc.? And what do you advise on college? Great question, because we're in the thick of it. My oldest is a freshman in high school, but we have many friends that are going off to school right now. My advice is very similar to what I said here. I'm not one of those people that says everybody should learn to code, everybody should go into computer science. No, I mean, if you want to, great, but don't do that just because you think it's a ticket to anything. It's the same advice of worry less about what that specific major is and worry more about building these kind of skills, be adaptable, be diverse, understand how to learn, be a lifelong learner, growth mindset, all these kind of like, and it's sort of, new age, it feels new age hippie-ish, or at least it did when I was growing up. Maybe we've evolved hopefully since then. But yeah, it's getting more of those kinds of experiences, because the statistic right now is in 10 years, 50% of the jobs that are held by people haven't been invented yet. So how could you pick a major if it's like you could flip a coin? So I focus much more on the disciplines that really train you to be adaptable. And some of the ones I've seen that are successful in that are the humanities. Our technology, I think, does a good job at that as well. But I focus more on getting early co-op and career experiences while you're going through school, and setting you up for success later. Yes. Getting personal though, I come from a family of veterinary. I didn't share that story. My family are all veterinarians. My dad, brother, sister, and then I have a niece and a nephew in vet school right now. So we're surrounded by them. I was actually a week away from going to vet school when I was working at a software startup, and that's how I got the bug and didn't go to vet school. So my oldest is looking at vet school as well. The younger two, they still say vet school, but we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Once you get that startup bug, it's hard to get rid of it.
It is. Yeah. It's good stuff though. It has not led me astray.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you, Matthew. And I think it looks like we don't have any more questions. So thanks for coming here today. And thank you, everyone. If you were able to join, we did record this session. It will be available on our YouTube channel, as well as on our, I always call it our tutorials site. Just a couple of announcements before we let you all go. We do have 2 webinars tomorrow. One is on the 18th and another one is on the 19th. So the first one will be on the 18th. It'll be an introduction to C# language integrated query, or I think it's pronounced LINQ. So this is a feature of the C# programming language that lets you work with data in a SQL-like syntax. And we have Joe Mayo, who is an independent consultant, giving that talk for us on the 18th. And on the 19th, we have time series analysis with the KNIME Analytics platform. And this is actually KNIME Analytics coming in and doing this for us. They do have a course on time series analysis, and we have the creator of the course as well as one of the instructors giving that talk for us next week on the 19th. So I hope to see you all there if you're able to. If not, don't worry about it. We will have recordings of everything. And so Matthew, thank you again. Thanks for sharing the title of your book and your experience and all of those soft skills. And everyone, thanks for joining once again. So I hope you all have a good rest of your day.